Hi everyone, thank you for joining me today. I'm sending a little bit of sunshine your way with this beautiful new set by Spellbinders, Sunflower and Ladybugs. These pretty watercolor flowers sit on ink blended backgrounds that are a mini slimline size. While you're watching, if anything grabs your attention, you'll find links to the products that I've used in the description of this YouTube video or on my blog at bonniecarolee.com. I've used the largest die from Spellbinders Mini Slimline Envelope Nested Card Creator to cut 3 panels of Bristol Smooth cardstock. I'm using my favorite ink for ink blending, Distress Oxides. This first panel is being done up in a combination of faded jeans, peacock feathers, and tumbled glass. I want my backgrounds to be very bold, and so I'm applying a good amount of pressure as I lay down my ink. Once I have the initial layer down, I'll work back and forth between the colors, extending one into the other. When working on areas of the panel where the colors overlap with one another, I lighten up my pressure so that I can get a nice smooth blend between the two. I take my time when I create an ink blended panel, putting on several layers of ink. For the second panel, I'm using Rustic Wilderness, Mowed Lawn, and Shabby Shutters. Of the 3 panels, I think this one is my favorite. For the final panel, I'm using Candied Apple, Abandoned Coral, and Spun Sugar. Distress Oxide inks take a while to dry, and as I'm applying the ink, I do use a little bit of protection to avoid getting fingerprints on the panel. And now for the sunflowers. I created 6, so there was a fair amount of die cutting. Each sunflower will be created with 3 sets of the flower petals and 2 of the flower centers, which are those die cuts that kind of look like a sun with a hole cut out of it. This die set comes with 3 sizes of leaves, although I'll just be using the large and medium-sized ones. These dies have been used to cut Canson XL watercolor paper. The final die in the set cuts multiple seed heads at once. These are itty-bitty die cuts, and I've just cut those directly out of black cardstock. Okay, so the coloring of the watercolor die cuts is very fast and easy, and I'm using my Magello Mission Gold watercolors. Because these flowers are so dimensional, I'm going to be coloring both the front and the back. The sunflowers have a pretty soft wash of yellow. Deep yellow is added into the base of the petals just on the front of the sunflowers. The flower centers are painted with orange and softened just a little bit with the deep yellow. For the leaves, I start off with a citrusy green and then drop in a darker green. To create a pretty texture, I use a sea sponge that has been slightly dampened and just pounce up and down over the leaves. When the paint is dry on the front of the die cuts, I flip them over and just put a quick coat of paint on the backs of them. For the layers of petals, I don't wait for them to dry completely. I go ahead and start the shaping while it is still damp. This makes the watercolor paper pliable and easier to work with. To shape the petals, I take my tweezers and place them at the base of each one and then squeeze upwards. Although this is fast and easy, I have 6 sunflowers and 3 sets of petals for each one, so it was a bit of work. To put the flowers together, a good amount of glue is placed in the center and the petals are offset for each layer. Each sunflower will have 2 of these flower center pieces. I use one of the smaller ball tools and just press along the inside of the ring, making it stand up like a crown. To add some additional texture, glue is applied to the top of those triangles, and then I'm going to dip it into a product called Flower Soft in a sand color. The effect is very soft and pretty. And while they're drying, I start working on the leaves. Using a medium-sized ball tool, I just make circular motions around the perimeter on the back of the leaves, flip it over, and then just press the tip down. This easy process gives the leaves a nice, natural, dimensional look. And now for the seed heads. They are so little and so many. I use my smallest ball tool, but to shape them on the molding mat would probably damage it. So I'm setting them on an eraser and simply just pressing down in the center of each one. I have to say that I did groan when I die cut them all and looked at the pile sitting in front of me. But with the use of a jewel picker and my small ball tool, they shaped very quickly. Thank goodness. Now back to the flower centers. Glue is applied around that inside ring, and then they are set down into the center of the sunflower. I do the first 3 flowers, let them dry, and then proceed to add in that second layer. The second one is going to fit snugly within the first one. When I adhere it, I make sure that it is offset from the first one, and look how full that center looks once it goes on. This is the second set of 3 sunflowers that I've made, and I found that I was just struggling to deal with all of those little seed heads and placing them one at a time. The inner die cut circle is at a lower level than those 2 flower centers that have been stacked. These initial seed heads were going to be covered up anyways, so I just filled that little cavity with glue and then took a good sized pinch of the seed heads and filled it in. So that was super fast, but more importantly, it made it a lot easier for me to deal with the individual seed heads. I was able to place them on top of the mound that I created and have them transition out to the rim of the flower center. I tried both tweezers and the jewel picker in dealing with these little tiny die cuts. In the end, I favored the jewel picker. However, I did have to come up with a bit of a method to make it work. If I simply dipped the seed head into the glue, it would fall off the jewel picker. If I dipped it into the glue and then dragged it off, it would stay on. So, I don't know. Seed head was dotted with glue, and I sprinkled on this colorful mixture of prills called gourd, which really enhances that sunflower. So I'm not really sure if I had to be so careful with the placement of those individual seed heads. Okay, card 1. I used 2 of the foil plates from Spellbinders Mini Slimline Nested Glimmer Dots to create the dot detail in black foil. The panel was then die cut with one of the dies from Mini Slimline and Envelope Card Creator. The panel was mounted on foam. I placed some weight on it until it dried. After the excess foam was trimmed off, it was matted on black cardstock and then onto a card base measuring 6 3/4 inches by 3 3/4 inches. And then on go the sunflowers. For one of them, I had already attached the leaves, but I actually didn't do this again because I like the flexibility of being able to reposition things until I get them exactly the way I like them. So obviously I was kind of stuck with where the leaves were for the first sunflower that I attached, but I did have some opportunity just to position the leaves more carefully with the second one. The main sentiment for this card is from Spellbinders Layered Mix and Match Sentiments, and it has been stacked on foam. A secondary sentiment has been foiled using the Mini Everyday Sentiments. This is a great set that also comes with accompanying banner dies to cut them out. So I've cut my sentiment out, but also a piece of foam to stack it on. I just want to mention that I've used the black foil for both the dot detail and the secondary sentiment for this card. This is the first experience I've had with this color of foil, and I have to say I'm pretty impressed with it. This card is finished up with some yellow and green confetti from a pretty pastel rainbow mix. If you watch any of my videos, you know what's coming next. I top up all of the confetti with Nouveau Crystal Drops Morning Dew. For the second card, I'm going to begin by using a couple of dies from Spellbinders Mini Slimline Envelope and Nested Card Creator. I had enough room on the panel to die cut the sentiment, but in the end I didn't use it. By the way, between all three cards, I got very good at popping out all those dot detail die cuts. Because I used the two nesting dies to cut this panel, I ended up with a frame and an inner rectangle. So first of all, I'm going to adhere the frame to a black cardstock panel. Before the panel was adhered, it was mounted on foam. The foam had been die cut using the smaller of the two dies that were used to cut the ink blended panel. And then on it goes to its card base that measures 6 3/4 inches by 3 3/4 inches. So I thought it would be fun to stack this sentiment using different colors of cardstock. So the sentiment was cut 6 times, 2 in light blue, 2 in navy, and 2 in yellow. And so it is a pretty cool effect. But to be honest with you, you can't really see it unless you hold the card up eye level close. And so ask me, do I wish that I had just mounted it on foam in 1/4 of the time? Yes. Live and learn. This card was finished up the same as the first one with a secondary foiled sentiment and yellow and green confetti. And drum roll, Crystal Nouveau Drops. For my final card, I'm using Spellbinders Layered Stitched Background. This is really an awesome die set. The rectangle die was used to cut the lower portion of the panel. This small rectangular panel was then die cut with the dot detail plate. The main panel was mounted on black cardstock. This same rectangular die was used to die cut ivory cardstock, which was then inlaid on the panel. The small panel with the dot detail was adhered over top of it. This die set comes with 2 layering die cuts that sit on top of the dot detail. For a little bit of added dimension, I cut each one twice out of the ivory cardstock and stacked them. The 2 layered stacked panels were then aligned to one another and adhered over the dot detail for a really pretty effect. I'll have just one sentiment for this card, again from the layered mix and match sentiments. The sentiment was die cut from a leftover piece of the ink blended panel and black sheet foam. The foam die cut is left in its foam backing, only removing the center of the letters. I apply the glue directly to the foam sentiment. The foam die cut actually creates an impression, making it very easy to align the cardstock one to it. Any minor adjustments can be done with a craft pick in the openings of the letters. The sentiment is set aside to dry for about 10 minutes. After the sunflowers are adhered and the sentiment is in place, then I can work on arranging the leaves. The leaves have a fair amount of dimension. Glue is applied to the base of the leaf, at the back and the front. They will have a double point of contact, so to speak, with the panel and the underside of the petals, making them very secure. This card is finished up with a handful of confetti and morning dew. And that's a wrap on these 3 cards featuring this beautiful new die set by Spellbinders, Sunflower and Ladybugs. It was fun creating different backgrounds for these sunflowers using warm, summery colors, especially on the tail end of winter. I hope these sunflowers brighten your day, and as always, I appreciate your visit.